And welcome to another edition of BCR Webcasting. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Lord Holmes of Richmond. Uh, Lord Holmes is going to be a keynote speaker at our forthcoming Trade and Investment Forum, which will take place on the 9th of March at the offices of SMBC in London. And that's a BCR and ITFA initiative. Welcome, Lord Holmes. I'd like to start off by asking you, why do you think this bill is important for trade, international trade and finance, and what impact do you think it will have on that in the UK and possibly beyond in other countries too?
Thank you very much, and a real pleasure to be with you, and very much looking forward to the conference on March the 9th. The Electronic Trade Documents Bill is incredibly important. It's probably the most important bill that most people have never heard of. I say that because when we get it through, it truly has the power to transform international trade, to take processes that currently take days and collapse that into seconds. So economic benefits, environmental benefits, trade benefits, and a real sense that the UK hopefully will be the first G7 nation to pass this legislation, can really spearhead a new dawn for international trade and collaboration.
So huge cost savings, potentially huge increases in efficiency, lowering of friction in terms of processes. And of course, from the point of view of our event that's coming up, this has huge implications for investors in terms of using electronic negotiable instruments and trading those. Do you foresee any obstacles for the adoption of this bill going through, or do you think everyone will be adopting it very quickly and it'll become widespread in its use?
I think the greatness of this bill is in that it combines what we can now do with new technologies, currently blockchain, but the bill is quite correctly neutral on which technologies can be used to enable, to underpin electronic trade documents. But what we can do when we combine so powerfully new technologies with common law, and as everybody involved in international trade will know, the power, the certainty, the centuries of history of English law being used for international trade is such a powerful force. So when you put that together with the potential power of new technologies, we've got a real sweet spot here. In terms of barriers, the greatest barrier is, once we pass this bill, working with, connecting with other nations, so we ensure that the trading world all incorporate Melita into their domestic legislation. So all nations, certainly nations that spring to mind, so for example, Singapore already embedded Melita into their legislation, but crucially, smaller nations, developing nations, so they can also take the benefits of what we can do with electronic trade documents, driving efficiency, driving economic growth, driving benefits through that most powerful of forces of nations trading with nations.
Do you think this is of particular importance to emerging markets? Just in case anyone's not familiar, Melita is the model law for electronic transferable records. But yeah, in terms of emerging markets, do you think this has a particular importance?
I think it has importance for all nations, but where it can particularly benefit emerging nations is in that cost reduction, in that speed, and in that reduction in environmental impact. So putting all that together, you've got a really powerful, compelling argument to get as many nations as quickly as possible into this electronic trade documents space for the benefit of all of us.
Do you think there might be any additional risks that might be posed by the introduction of this bill? I was listening to the giving evidence session at the House of Lords, and there were at least a couple of questions about risk posed. And from my point of view, it seems to me that paper documents pose more of a risk than electronic uh, uh, documents, and paper documents are can be full of errors, and quite a lot of time is spent in correcting those errors. Do you see that any particular risks that might occur with electronic documents?
It's interesting when one considers rightly risk. There's always in people's mind a perceived risk from moving from a state of affairs that is well known and has been the case for centuries, certainly in current form, back to the early 1880s with the Bills of Exchange Act. But it's, as we all know, extraordinarily papery, extraordinarily prone to risk, even if those risks are only in the space of mistakes on the document. So just because something is well known and well used doesn't mean it's risk free. Equally, it doesn't mean that a new potential structure from electronic trade documents is more risky. In reality, it's de facto less risky. What the underlying technology needs to ensure is obviously the security, the veracity, the immutability. Crucially, when it comes to trading, the interoperability of the systems and thus the instruments. But there's no sense whatsoever, quite the contrary, that electronic trade documents would be more risky. And indeed, when you add in the environmental upside and the wider context, clearly they are considerably less risky and certainly more secure, provided that the right technology choices are made.
Well, that's good to hear. Less risky and many advantages which you've mentioned already. But this technology is, as I understand it, been available for many years. Why are we just doing this now? Why did we not undertake this several years ago?
It's a really good question, and many people ask, well, surely these documents are already electronic. We've already got smart contracts. Surely this has already all been done. But the nature of trade documents, as many viewers, listeners will be aware, are particular in that they are possessive documents, thus very different to a contract. If you hold the document, if you possess the bill of lading, currently, if you hold the paper, you hold the goods. So what that required was a technology solution which could be absolutely assured that there'd be no duplicability. There'd be no sense that you could pass an electronic document and then pass it again and again. So there couldn't be duplicity, there couldn't be duplicability, and there couldn't be replicability. Now, currently, blockchain obviously enables that. Other technologies are also coming through which will enable it. But it's absolutely critical that we could have that assurance that it could be based on technology which was immutable, and also crucial that we're able to use the English common law concept of possession rather than exclusive control to enable flexibility within the legislation, to enable all of those years, those centuries of case law to be brought to bear, rather than potentially having something set up which could, not necessarily would, but could potentially drive a difference between the treatment of paper documents and electronic trade documents. But probably the key point on that, above all of it, is taking the advantage of the concept of possession in English law, whilst to every sense doing something which is as good as identical to the exclusive control concept used in Singapore, and indeed where other nations have looked to implement the model law, because interoperability is absolutely, obviously critical to all of this. There's no point the UK passing a piece of legislation to enable electronic trade documents and the rest of the world not doing it. We can set a ship off to sea, but it obviously has to port somewhere else. And the key post passage of this legislation is to ensure that we work collaboratively with all the great organizations which operate overseas, with the international chambers of commerce, with investors, with funders, with insurers, everybody together pushing the same message. Electronic trade documents are a thoroughly good thing for all of us. Let's get everybody into this new space for international trade.
So clearly, a lot of assurances need to be in place, and that takes time. And interoperability, as you mentioned, absolutely key to this. And of course, yes, we want everyone to adopt this and start using it. And uh, what in terms of our event next month, how important do you think these kind of events are for spreading the word and making sure everybody understands what's at stake and how these things operate, and how what the potential adoption and take up of instruments like this will be?
Really looking forward to the event on March the 9th, because gatherings, conferences, events, bilaterals, trilaterals, meetings, they are all not just important, they're essential when it comes to discussing the possibilities, discussing the difficulties that some nations, some organizations, some sectors may feel there are in moving to the electronic trade document world. So it's absolutely critical that we have more of these gatherings in the UK and around the world, enabling traders, funders, insurers, shippers, everybody to use their networks to come together to get this positive message out there that there is benefit for everybody in this. And though things can feel extraordinarily difficult and uncertain at the moment, understandably, with the current geopolitical outlook, with the current economic difficulties, it's really important that we look to issues such as electronic trade documents to see that we collectively can do something positively to drive growth, to drive economic activity, to drive trade, to bring down environmental impact. Well, that's something we can all do together for the benefit of all of us.
Have to keep moving forward. Lord Holmes, thank you very much indeed for your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you again at the Trade Investment Forum, which once again will be on the 9th of March at the offices of SMBC in London. Thank you.
Thank you very much.